Welcome to Pax Europiana, the podcast about peace and prosperity and very much about Schengen enlargement. Of course, it's not only about Schengen enlargement here, I'm also talking about NATO enlargement. By the way, immoral anti-solidarity Austria is still not in NATO. Let's never forget that, my friend from Romania and from Bulgaria, and I call to remind all allies in NATO that you are now very badly and shabbily treated by a neutral country. Call all NATO allies for a meeting of the North Atlantic Council and raise this discriminatory position from Austria, a neutral country, which is not in NATO and is also rejecting NATO for a reason, because of massive Russian influence. There's always, and I'm often asked, my friends from Romania and Bulgaria, why Austria is staying neutral when Sweden and Finland are joining NATO, because we could have joined as well. We joined NATO together. It is because of Wolfgang Schüssel. Wolfgang Schüssel, who many like, is a great European, but in reality, after he lost the 2006 elections, he fell into the temptation of being the Russian conduit in Vienna towards OMV and other Austrian companies, mainly the energy sector, and this has been very lucrative for him, and he has been now in this year, decisive year of the war of Russia against Ukraine, he has been the one who was making sure that the Austrian People's Party is not committing towards NATO, and then the smaller, potentially pro-NATO parties like the Liberals, NEOS, and the Greens, who would maybe consider such a move under some circumstances, and they have not had this cover of the big center right-wing party, because it is unfortunately moved more into the Orban direction in the last years. And Schüssel, with its direct links, was also to Putin, was also the man responsible. Never forget, Mr. Nehammer was the only EU prime minister who met Mr. Putin during the war. In April, he flew directly to Putin, had a direct meeting with him. Nobody else, to my knowledge, has that of any of the European countries. Yeah? They were talking with him after the war, like Macron and Scholz, but nobody had a direct meeting, only Nehammer. And this was organized by Wolfgang Schüssel. So all these ideas that Austria is in a direct link with Russia via the OMV is very true. And it's also Mr. Schüssel. So if any of your Romanian politicians still have links to Mr. Schüssel from the past when he was still in the pro-European politician, and he is still very active today, so please call him and put pressure on this point, because that's one potential to break this veto in this week, because he is still the dominant person in exactly these issues of foreign policy. He is controlling Mr. Schallenberg, Mr. Nehammer, Mrs. Mikl-Leitner, Mr. Sobotka, and Mr. Kana. All these people listen to him, and he is these are basically the persons who are still controlling a massive influence on this issue. Or the people I have talked about: Kana, the Minister of Interior; Mikl-Leitner, the Governor of Lower Austria; Nehammer, the Chancellor; and Sobotka, the Parliament President. These are the persons basically who have made this decision. Nobody else has, and Schüssel in the background, obviously. So here is very important. This can be still broken, this veto, but you have to know who is behind it and where it makes sense to tackle them. Because of course it's very important to do all the normal steps of diplomacy. The Austrian state president van der Bellen from the Green Party has already come out against this veto. Very good. But now it's very important that the parliament presidents of Bulgaria and of Romania tackle directly Mr. Sobotka, the Austrian parliament president, because he is very much behind it. He is basically maybe the second most powerful person in the Austrian framework of Lower Austria, of the People's Party there, and this is very much about these elections in January. So to mobilize the parliament diplomacy and the people who know him, the International Parliamentarian Union, and all these issues, this is very important. And don't allow this kind of, we will postpone it, and we will discuss it. The Austrians have never made a veto. Schallenberg is the master diplomat. Yeah? Our foreign minister. He will always say, oh, we are not vetoing, we're just postponing it. We have mentioned this many years, but de facto, they are trying to be the more anti-immigration policy, because they are very much driven by this extreme right-wing party, the FPÖ. Mr. Kickl is his name. He is the man who is really going into fascist terms. Yeah, I'm very careful with using fascist terms. I'm a center right-wing person. I'm not really these extreme terms. But I've just listened to Mr. Kickl making his just now, some hour ago. He has made a preview press conference of his weekly activities. He's using, I mean, I'm not a political scientist, but you don't have to be one to understand. He's talking about fight, war, the sanction regime against Syria is responsible. I mean, he uses the classical fascist terminology in German language. He is very much in that direction, and he is using all this kind of political topoi which the Italian fascists have started in the 20s. Yeah, I don't see Hitler. He is totally idiot. Yeah, but he's not he's not taking over the world or something like this. But he is using these terms, and he's purposefully using them, because he is now, for example, talking about the big wave of migration, like the Völkerwanderung. It's a very specific term in Austrian and German language, used to describe the big movement of people after the fall of the Roman Empire. So he is very specifically in this kind of extreme right-wing policy and terminology, because he tries to portray at the time of the fall of NATO, of the fall of EU, and the only, in reality, the only one who is falling is the empire of Putin, who is funding the FPÖ, and you will see it will disappear as a political power once the funding lines from Russia are withdrawn for them and the AfD and the Linke, and the funding, of course, unfortunately. The Russia is massively funding the political system, and now, of course, there is this Qatar corruption scandal. But the reality is, we should investigate the Russian funding scandal in our political party system all over the place, because it's very big. But I digress, because the FPÖ has only indirect influence on this Austrian decision, because despite they're behaving like it, they are not in power. Who is in power is Mr. Nehammer, is Mr. Kana, is Mr. Sobotka, is indirectly Mr. Schüssel, because it's the Austrian People's Party who is in power. And understand the sequence of things, because it all comes from this time that Mr. Kurz, Sebastian Kurz, who many of you liked, and I liked in the beginning as well. I thought he's a serious person, but he's not. Yeah, he took a lot of Russian money. He was lying a lot. He was faking. He was tricksing. He was actually a populist. Yeah? And I stopped intensively to engage with him after his 2015 closing of the Balkan, this anti-Balkan populism. Actually, he came to Kosovo and many places. I worked many times, and he claimed to be a friend for the intercultural dialogue, and for him integration of foreigners in Austria. That was his start, and then I liked him. But then he saw the powerful force Trumpist populism is, and then he moved completely in the direction, because he saw that's his life chance to be chancellor, and he managed, and congratulations in a way, he managed to be chancellor. But he has, of course, sold out to Russia. He has sold out all the values, and he has created this populist type in Austria. And he has not created it, but he has abused it for the People's Party, and he has transformed the People's Party in this populist movement. And now, of course, they all, because they are reaching now 20% in the opinion polls, they think, let's do it again like in 2015, 16, 17, because we have reached over 40%. So we need to basically drum up and rile up the people against foreigners. Otherwise, we lose against the FPÖ. That's their conclusion, and that's what they are doing. And Romania is here the victim, because it's not about, it's also about Romanians, because that sounds in Austrian kind of, Romanians, and it's all the foreigners from the east, because they perception of Austria as a kind of alpine Trutzburg, a fortress against Eastern European immigrants, is very much a long-lasting topos in the Austrian politics. Unfortunately, I myself, when I came back in 2004 from Austria, I said, we have achieved enlargement, bravo, we have the Slovaks equal to us in the EU, hooray. I was booed out, and I was seen as somebody who brings all these Easterners, and I bring them, and it's good. Have you seen the growth? figures of the Eastern European economies of the 2004 and 2007 classes. This is really what kept us strong in the difficult last decade, and this is really a big success story. I'm very proud of it, and I'm calling now. I have started a second Austrian People's Petition, not only for Austria to join NATO, that's my first one, thanks for signing, but the second one is to open the Austrian labor market for the Ukrainians, for the Moldovians, for the Georgians, for the Western Balkans. All the future EU members who hopefully will join very fast should also join the labor market. And as you know, when you listen to my podcast, also to join and to adopt the euro already in Ukraine, because the currency is anyhow broken with the cost of the war. So take the euro, Moldova as well, and also Romania. That's also my critical point, because I'm not only like I love you Romania and everything is perfect. No, you have not recognized Kosovo. Very big mistake. Yeah? And you have not joined the Eurozone. Very big mistake. Do that. Yeah. Don't be like, oh, we don't know. No, do the things decently. Discuss it, learn, and recognize Kosovo. And you see yesterday again, all this triangle, I call it the axis of evil. Vienna, Budapest, Serbia, they have escalated again in Kosovo yesterday. Luckily, there was no night of start of a war, but there was violence in the north of Kosovo, and that was very bad. So we need actually Romania to join fully the West, like Bulgaria has recognized already. Thanks a lot, Bulgaria. And Bulgaria has backed the currency to the euro. Just I need. Sorry, I'm getting better. I'm sorry that I have to make these videos, but it's this week now, and I want to use the momentum to fight for Romania and Bulgaria and Schengen, but also to call Romania for better policy, because you could have also supported already 1 year ago when I started the campaign to have Moldova to adopt the euro. You could have supported it. It would have been much better. And okay, anyhow, let's talk about Schengen and what can be achieved. Yeah. Here are the names which need to be tackled. Another important point is Israel. Netanyahu is now back in power. He is a very good friend of Romania, the president, and of Bulgaria. He has done a very specific support for Romania, Bulgaria. He has visited the countries. You have the direct contact. You can call him. Please, Mr. Ioannis, Mr. Radev, yeah, call him. This is very important. Yeah. He has a direct link to Schüssel. He has a direct link to Kurz, who is still important for Nehammer. And he has a direct link also to Nehammer. So this is something which can help, yeah, because there is direct center right-wing IDU links here, and Netanyahu is a global personality. So do that, mobilize Bibi, and try to get him to help and remind him that he is a friend of Romania, and now it's the moment to act, because it can be overruled in the council. This decision is not in stone. And you have seen the very painful face of Mr. Schallenberg, our foreign minister, today at the Foreign Affairs Council. He was already pretty much in the defensive, because he didn't think that the opposition against Austrian veto power is getting so serious. So he feels the pain already, and it can be done. Bibi can be of help, the Americans. I've mentioned already who in Germany can help, Merz and Cem Özdemir, and also, of course, Baerbock, and mobilize the Germans, mobilize the Italians. It is maybe a bit complicated how I explained everything about the Brenner. Not everybody has to be an expert for Austrian history, South Tyrol, and the transit issue very specifically. But the Romanian Transport Commissioner, Mrs. Valena, yeah. She is in charge. You have the person in charge in the EU Commission to block the Austrian funding for the Brenner. You have to be also ready for that, and that's really extremely important for Austria. That's really extremely, because Austria is a rich country. You cannot easily, you don't have so many pressure points for Austria, but what you really have is the Brenner, and I repeat, and this is very important. But that's far away from Lower Austria. Tyrol is an important state, and it's important. So let's focus what we can do in Lower Austria, what Romania especially can do in Lower Austria. I've mentioned already Mr. Karas, the Vice President of European Parliament. He is an important personality in Lower Austria. You can contact him. Also, Lukas Mandl, he's also from Lower Austria. Contact him. He's a big friend of Kosovo, of Albania, of the Balkan states, and of enlargement. Also, I'm sure about Romania, Bulgaria. Contact him. He has also influence, and that's very good. But he will not be decisive, nor will be Karas, because they are not so powerful. The real persons who are behind is like Mr. Schüssel, and here it's very important to go about the economics. But not the boycott is a nice thing, but the boycott will also not result so much. But again, I want to talk now about the OMV and Raiffeisen. Sorry. Raiffeisen is very important in Lower Austria. Very, very important in Lower Austria. Sorry, I'm in a terrible state. Yes, I will be fine again. Thanks for your well wishes, but I have to make this video now because it's important. Raiffeisen, call the Raiffeisen guys and talk with the Raiffeisen guys very seriously, because this is important. They have financial influence in Lower Austria, and that's obvious, and that's very important. Less Erste, it's more a Vienna bank. There is not so much influence in Lower Austria, but Raiffeisen and Lower Austria, that's like a unit, and this is very important. You have to call the hierarchy up in Raiffeisen. This is effective. The most important, obviously, is energy, and it's Petrom. I've already recommended to threaten the nationalization of Petrom, and I repeat it. Of course, you shouldn't do it ultimately, because that's a wild thing to do, but it's something which you really should threaten, and you should also discuss it in terms of gas deliveries, about the Black Sea, and this is a huge topic. I understand there's negotiations between the government and OMV already, and there is now, and that's important, the Austrians are anyhow thinking to selling the exploration part of the OMV and to nationalize the distribution part. So that's a very good policy as well. But if they, and it will be the Norwegians, and it's a Norwegian-American fund who wants to buy the exploration part, which is also part of the Petrom, and then also the Black Sea, and they have the money, they have the competence. Austria is not a, we were historically a gas, and we could be a gas producer once if we had allowed fracking, but that's the Austrian politicians are not ready to do. So we have a good company, but it's a small medium company in big energy business of the world. And so the Norwegians are really very big, and it would be very good if this is all sold to the Norwegian. It's good to reduce the Austrian debt, to get this kind of very entrenched influence of Russia in OMV out of the exploration business in Romania. So it's all very, very good. And so you should foster this development by threatening nationalization, because then you can basically push the Austrian state into submitting towards selling. Because if there is anyhow legal uncertainty about these huge resources in Romania, and then I think Magnus Brunner, the Minister of Finance, will be much more open to accept this offer of this Norwegian-American fund, and that's a NATO fund. And then your resources, because never forget, at the moment, your Petrom, which is the very important asset of Romania, is managed by a neutral country state, which is partly controlled by Russia. OMV is the hub of Russia. I explained it. It's basically, Austria was first divided, controlled in 45, then 55 got the neutrality for unity, and then the Russians were still very dominant in the east of Austria, and the OMV was basically the former state-owned company. Then it was partly privatized, but the thing is, in 68, because of the geography of Austria, OMV was turned with Russian help in the gate of Russian gas in towards Germany and Austria and Italy and whole Central Europe, Western Europe. This was very important for the Russians, because in the 70s, these newfound energy riches which could be exported, because energy you can only useful if it's you really sell it. So ultimately you make it into foreign exchange. That is why Putin came in 2018 to celebrate the 50 years of cooperation. That's one of the reasons why the Austrian embassy of Russia, the Russian embassy in Vienna, is one of the biggest in the world. That's why they have all this huge influence in Austria, because of the energy business, because it's from geography, it was at the Cold War division, it was the entry point into the free world. the shadow free world. I always called Austria kind of northern Yugoslavia. We were somehow in between as a neutral country, but we were part of the free world, obviously, in EFTA, and we were, of course, not occupied anymore, but we were trying to be very close and to Russia in order not to provoke them, because in Czechoslovakia there were the Soviet troops. So nevertheless, so Austria and OMV played a huge role for Gazprom and for Rosneft ever in history in Central Europe. And for Romania to make sure that your exploration, your Petrom, is in a NATO country's ownership, is very much in the strategic interest of a NATO member, Romania, because you see you're no longer depending on neutral Austria. And of course, Austria the Norwegians will pay the market price. So it's a good deal for Austrian taxpayers as well. And it will be a massive improvement against Austrian corruption, because OMV, it was controlled by the Socialist Party historically from the creation in 1945. And this was basically the Austrian mineral company was controlled by the Socialists. Yeah? This was basically all the former chancellors and the prime ministers, the minister of finance were coming. They were learning in OMV, not maybe all, but most of them, like Klima, Ruttensdorfer. This was the Kaderschmiede, we call it. We used this Soviet technology of Kader. And so this was basically where the socialists, young socialists, they were getting good management positions, and then they were put into politics once they have learned something. This was until basically 2000. Then came Schüssel, and he changed the political landscape of Austria with the coalition with Haider, and then basically they have taken the control. He actually promised to sell all these companies. It was the biggest lie of all. He sold some, but then they found out, the Christian Democratic cadres, they found out it's much better not to sell, because then you just reduce the state debt and the state influence. No, it's much better for us and our children if we own these companies and we control it, and no longer the socialists. And so what happened, they put all the Christian Democratic cadres into these state-owned companies, and instead of really privatizing like it was promised, they have changed basically the control of the state companies, and now they control it. The worst of all was, of course, Thomas Schmidt. That goes too much into the Austrian politics, but then he was controlling all the so-called state-owned trust funds, our state trust fund, basically. It's called ÖBAG, if you're in detail interested. And I'm very interested, because this was the whole lie. In 2002, they told us he will privatize it. And he privatized some of the steel companies, the ones who are really in global competition, like steel, they had to privatize partly at least. But the others, which are basically producing energy or controlling some assets like property, they are now in this trust fund. And now it's basically my ex-cadres controlling all these things, yeah? And it's very bad. Yeah? So I call for real privatization, and it's a really great opportunity. If Romania can help us to threaten Petrom nationalization, then maybe we can manage to get all the exploration business out of OMV sold to the Norwegian state, which is a really good NATO ally. By the way, Norway should also join the EU. I am very much strictly on that line. That would be fantastic, but that's another issue. But I call for Romania. Don't be hesitant, because I know the Romanian mentality. I know in the 96 I was not so often, I was 7, 8 times or 9 times, maybe 10 times, I don't remember detail, but I know you are very polite and you are very kind of careful, because you don't want to offend the big Austria. Actually, Austria is just 9 million inhabitants, and you are whatever 17, or I don't know exactly the numbers, but somehow like that. You are very big, and you're also a very competent country, and you have a big role in history to play, and you will be a very important country. Also Bulgaria, by the way. You should not have this kind of under the carpet attitude. Oh, I'm sorry. No, but really impose yourself and threaten to nationalize it, because it would help us very much to get rid of all this exploration business. And it's much better if this is in American and in Norwegian hands than in incompetent pro-Russian hands of the OMV. If you don't believe me, look at the board. We have even some pro-Russian person in the board, and it's a real big mess. And the future of sorry, I'm in bad shape. The future of OMV should be a chemical company and not an exploration company, because there are others in the world who can do that much better. Good. I've said that about Petrom, about Raiffeisen, about Karas, about yes, also the left wing. It's very important. Mr. Kern, he is a former energy apparatchik turned now a former chancellor, but he is very influential because also the Social Democrats have moved against Schengen now for Romania. And here, Mr. Radev, the president of Bulgaria, I address you. You know, you are the most important European socialist to my best knowledge, with Mr. Timmermans and others, and now Mr. Sanchez is elected. But address the Austrian Social Democrats because the European Social Democrats, anyhow, you have a big problem with corruption these days with the Greeks. So maybe do something good and put pressure on the Austrian Social Democrats because Mrs. Randy Wagner, she wants to be the chancellor in 2024 and she wants to govern this country, and now they're falling into this populist line because of this competition internally of the Social Democrats, where they have this one governor from Burgenland who is challenging her with a more nationalistic and well, not patriotic, how you call it, xenophobic line. He is like a populist, a left-wing populist, like Wagenknecht. He's our Wagenknecht in Austria. And now basically you have this problem. And so if the European left wants Randy Wagner in power, you have now to talk to her and make sure that this is not the way she can do business if she wants to be the chancellor. It's not everybody can be driven by a Russian funded Austrian nationalist party who is driving this agenda at the moment, and the others are completely in disarray, and then they just obey to Mr. Kickl, driven by his extremist agenda, while we should actually sue him for treason, because he is a treasonable asset of Putin, Mr. Kickl, and that should be done. Anyhow, so I'm calling for the socialists, don't make any coalition with the populists, don't go to the extreme left like Wagenknecht. This is a big historic mistake if you do that. Yeah, I remember you that this was the line of the socialists which enabled Hitler in the 1930s. Yeah, don't forget these historic mistakes. Don't go down that line. Anyhow, too much history here. I want to talk about the future. It's still possible to break this veto in this week if you have concentrated effort on the high level, but you need to squeeze Austria via Germany, via America, via Israel, via Italy. That's very important. There's also necessary to confront Orban, who is the mastermind of all this crisis. Orban is behind Nehammer. Let's not forget this. And confront Serbia, because Serbia gives the vote for this the big swing vote of the Serb voters in Vienna is so decisive in this triangle between the Austrian People's Party, Nehammer's parties, and the nationalists, and they are the big flexible voting bloc which Vucic is controlling and putting towards Kickl at the moment, and that's why there is the swing in the Austrian election cycle. So the Romanians have to correspond to that, vote for the Greens or for the Liberals, or make an offer to the People's Party to vote for them. It's also possible to replace the Serb voters, which Vucic has ordered to Kickl now. And if you don't believe me all this and you say I'm a dreamer, what I'm talking about, every Austrian should be like Austrians. The reality is we are a European country, and that's very good. So, you know, we have achieved so much in Europe, and now they are threatening us again because Putin ultimately wants to split the European Union and NATO and make a big mess. That's why I'm calling so much for the EU to join NATO, for a transatlantic free trade agreement, and so on and so on. This is what we believe in EDS. This is what we believe in EPP. In 2004, I was personally writing the application in the party, in the agenda for the election, that we want a free trade agreement. Yeah? And it was already back then, Orban, I remember very well, he was voting against it. And by a very close margin, I managed to put it in the election platform for 2004. But then I was kicked out. Yeah? So that was the situation of 2004. So this is a long-lasting struggle for a united Europe, and of course Russian rising, and Russia now going all in with a war against European unity and transatlantic Europe. I think now, of course, Romania, you have to decide. And you are just the collateral damage of this big struggle. But you have to make your choices, and you made them. You are pro-American, you are pro-NATO, pro-EU, but now go all in, recognize Kosovo, fight the Austrian veto, nationalize Petrom, and go all in, and of course break this axis of Orban and Vucic and Nehammer. The defeat will lead to the defeat of Nehammer. If you win this year, and it's a very big thing here, if you will win break this veto, get into Schengen now, and then we'll have a big defeat, and Mr. Nehammer will no longer be Chancellor. Very good. Let's get a real pro-European into this position. That would be very good. There are many, many pro-Schengen people in the Austrian People's Party today. Many of my friends are pro-Schengen. I know them all from my youth. And they're all very much pro-Schengen, Romania and Bulgaria, and they know that very well. And this will be much better, of course. And then we can build a stronger Europe, and Austria can join NATO. And of course, we will defeat also, and we will outline all these funding sources of the FPÖ. And Mr. Kickl will not be the prime minister. He will be in jail for treason, high treason. This is the future of Kickl. And that's much better. And the Romanians, please help us in that one. And the Bulgarians, please. Yeah? It's very important. Yeah? Recognize Kosovo as well, and make sure that you are joining the Eurozone as fast as possible. Call Olaf Scholz and say, we want to be in the Euro. Let's help us. Let's be more united, because every puzzle piece of more unity is important. Schengen, Euro, NATO, OECD, by the way. Anyhow, half an hour, I have to recover. I will come back tomorrow, hopefully in better shape. Thanks a lot. And Romania and Schengen. Bye.